I have completed the assembly of my Eachine F18 50mm EDF Jet kit. The only thing I have left to do, I've got my rear skid on there. I've got to finish up my front landing skid, and I've got to put my wing protectors on it. And I will get that done before I head out to the field, and we'll launch it in the air and see if it will fly. But I wanted to give you some specs on this. I recovered or salvaged the EDF unit, the EDF motor and fan out of my Arrow's 50mm EDF jet after I retired it. So the 50mm EDF unit that's in here has a 2627 motor. It's a 4500 kV. It has a 50mm fan with 11 blade fan in it. All right, the servos are Hextronic HXT 900 9-gram analog servos by Bohr. I didn't have any 9-gram digital servos. It's one of the things I'm going to have to put on my next hobby order, is to get some digital servos. The ESC that I put in, I love these ESCs. It's the Hobbywing Skywalker 50 amp 2S to 4S ESC. It has a switching voltage regulator that supplies 5 volts at 5 amps. So this thing will have all the power that it needs. I'm just going to be flying it with a standard 6-channel Lemon RX receiver. The protocol is DSM2, DSMX. It's just a PWM receiver. And the reason that I would rather have a gyro and an SBUS receiver in it, but the gyros I have are only 4-channel. Well, you've got your split elevators back here, and I don't, one thing that I like about some of the other EDF jets that I have that have these split elevators is they have a single 9-gram servo with 2 connecting rods that works the elevator instead of having separate servos for those. I wish that these other manufacturers would start doing that, so that number one, you didn't have to have a reverse wired servo if you're wanting to put it on a Y cable, or if you don't have a reverse wired servo, you're going to have to put an inline servo reversing module on it. Well, I didn't want to have to do that. So I've got those 2 servos and 2 separate channels and that 6-channel receiver, so that I could reverse the direction on one of them and not have to use a white cable, not have to use a reverse wired servo or a reversing module, on one of the servos, just to make all the wiring and stuff as simple as possible. And so I also have my ailerons and 2 separate channels on the receiver. I thought I might experiment later on with flaperons, bringing it in for a landing, see if it will allow me to bring it in a little more slowly, with flaperons on it. Okay, so that's how I've got that set up. The battery that I'm going to be using for the Maiden launch and Maiden flight, and for the first flight session, is going to be a Nano-Tech 4S 1600 milliamp hour 70C LiPo that weighs 178 grams. Now, I had to carve a lot of foam out of this canopy just to be able to close it with that 1600 milliamp hour LiPo in it. It seems that I have the Eachine F18 50mm jet as well, and it seems like there's a lot more room inside the battery compartment for the Eachine F16 than there is the Eachine F18. So I don't know why they can't make those a little bit roomier. I mean, the F18, that is really a narrow fuselage on this. But anyway, I got it in there. I got enough foam carved out of the canopy that I can actually get the darn thing closed with the 1600s. Now the 1600s on my other 50mm EDF jets, the 4S 1600s, weighing 178 grams, they feel really good at that weight with that size battery in it. The weight of the aircraft feels good. At my altitude, I have flown them, and I still do fly them with some 4S 1800 milliamp hour LIPOs that are heavier than the 16s, and they feel just a little bit too heavy on the wings with that LiPo in it. But So I'm going to start off with the 1600s, and I will test it with an 1800 as well. The 1800s actually fit in here easier because they're not as tall, they're longer, they're about the same width as the 1600s, but they're not as tall. So with those, you don't have to carve nearly as much foam out of the canopy as I did with the 1600s, but that was a lot of foam that I had to carve out of there. All right, so the weight of the plane, the weight of my airframe with all the electronics, without the landing skids and without the battery, is 407 grams. Now the weight of the LiPo is 178 grams, so that brings the all-up weight without the landing skids and wing protectors on it to 585 grams. So my guess is that once I get my front landing skid on here and my 2 wing protectors, it's probably going to be right at 600 grams all-up weight with that 1600 mAh 4S LiPo. Now I did measure the amp draw on this EDF unit on 4S when I had it in the T33, and it was pulling about 36 to 37 amps at wide open throttle. I did put that 1600 mAh battery in. I charged it up fully. I held the jet up vertically. I don't know how much thrust that unit is going to provide, but I did hold it vertical in my hand and run it up to full throttle, and it was going to push vertical out of my hand. So I know it's going to have better than a 1-to-1 thrust to weight ratio. But these EDF units, these EDF jets are really fun to fly, and they sound really cool. But EDF units they're just not very efficient. They're not very efficient at all. To be pulling 36 to 37 amps for no more thrust than it's providing. I mean, I could put a pusher motor and prop on it with a smaller 4S LiPo at 1300, get more flight time, and have unlimited vertical and not pull as many amps at full throttle. So EDF units are fun, but they're just not very efficient. So be aware of that if you've never flown one or purchased one. I did put carbon reinforcement underneath the entire front of the fuselage all the way up to where there's a lot more foam, you know, where it attaches to the fuselage. This is always, you know, the area underneath the canopy here is always the weak area on these EDF jets, and I always recommend that you put in some kind of reinforcement in there. Whether you're putting, you know, carbon on the inside of the canopy, or whether you're putting it underneath, you know, the fuselage or along the sides of the fuselage. But I really, with all of these EDF jets, I really suggest that you reinforce that foam underneath the canopy. That's the weak point. I do not understand why manufacturers do not reinforce those areas, but almost every EDF jet that I have had to reinforce that area because the manufacturer didn't do it. One other thing I was concerned about, because I have had EDF jets that were designed for 3S like this one, that EDF unit was in a 3S jet that I set up for 4S. But I have had problems getting enough air fed to the EDF units on 4S. So I did cut a couple of additional air inlets on top of the fuselage. I just fabricated the vanes and the top plates out of a styrofoam plate. So styrofoam plate foam is what I used for that. Each one of these additional air inlets on the top have more area for wind flow than the area that they put in, than the cheater hole that they put in underneath the fuselage. So these 2 additional air inlets will provide about 2.5 times the airflow of what this does on the bottom. So I think that on 4S, with those additional air inlets in it, I think that it's gonna have plenty of airflow going to it. So I don't think that that's going to be a problem. Anyway, it should have plenty of power on 4S. It should have plenty of airflow. It is going to be kind of heavy. I got to admit it. I think this is heavier than my Eachine F18. It's about the same size. Maybe the foam is denser. I don't know, but it's definitely going to be heavier than my F16 on 4S, and it's definitely heavier than the F16 converted EDF jet with the pusher motor and prop. That's pretty light compared to the EDF ones. So anyway, I will finish up the landing skids and the wing protectors, and I'll meet you out the field.
Launching. Whoa, that was a little squirrely on the takeoff. Oh, that is way too fast of a roll rate. I'm going to have to change my linkage. Oh man, it doesn't feel like it's on 4S power, that's for sure. Put in a lot less aileron there on that roll. It moves through the air fast, but it certainly doesn't feel like it's got that much power, guys. Not like my other 4S EDF jets. I've got that EDF unit in it from that Aeros T33. And I got a lot of trimming, a lot of trim work to do on it. The balance seems pretty good, but I have really got to tone down those ailerons. Oh man, that is way too fast of a roll. And this is all manual mode, there's no gyro in it. It can't be starved for air, not with all of the air, the additional air inlets I cut in it. Okay, let's see if we can bring it in and land it. There's no way that that's not getting enough air. But it just doesn't have much oomph to it, you know? Not a lot of power. Let's see if we get lined up here. Whoop. I'm getting squirrely on me because I'm going around. My ailerons are way too touchy. Alright, let's see if we could slow it down a little bit and bring it in. Without killing it. Ooh, that was a close one. Let's try that one more time because I'm going to be out of battery power. She is just really, really squirrely right now. Oh, in the ditch. Yep, there goes one of my wing protectors. All right. I don't know. I don't know how successful that was, man. It was really, really squirrely. But let's see what we've got left in the battery pack. 3.5, 3.5, 3.5.
All right, well, it wasn't the maiden flight I was hoping for, but it came back relatively unscathed after putting it in the ditch. The only thing I'm going to have to do is reattach the wing protector on it. Now, I think that I took the F-16 out with me as well, and I put 2 flights on it before I put the F-18 in the air. The F-16 has got a pusher motor and prop, and it has a ton of power, and it has unlimited vertical. So I think the fact that I flew this jet before I flew this jet, pusher motor and prop, and EDF, I think that this one kind of clouded my perception as to the amount of power I should be getting out of this F-18, because I reviewed the video, the flight video, and one of those full throttle loops that I pulled was a pretty darn wide loop. So I don't think that it's this F-18 doesn't have enough power on 4S. I think it's just that, you know, flying the F-16 first kind of threw my perception off for the F-18 and what kind of power I should be getting out of it. And also, when I landed and I checked the cells in the LiPo, I wasn't easy in the throttle when I had it in the air. I had my flight timer set for 3.5 minutes because I didn't know how this, you know, this dual nozzle cutout where it's splitting the airflow. I didn't know how that would affect the performance of the EDF or how much amps it was going to use. So I set my flight timer for 3.5 minutes. I had what two bailouts on the landing and got it down on the third one, although not very well. But so I had it in the air for 4 minutes and 36 seconds, and the voltage in the cells was just under 3.6 volts per cell. So I also think that on 4S this is just as efficient with that 4S 1600 milliamp hour 70C LiPo as my other EDF jets are. I am absolutely certain that this EDF unit is not starved for air with the 2 air inlets that I put on top of it. Everything felt good. The balance felt good. The elevator was a little bit too responsive. When I came in, I almost touched down, and I tried to pull the nose up, and man, did it pull the nose up. So I had to go around on that pass, bail out of that landing. But I like the amount of elevator I've got in it. I actually have my CG set 5mm forward of the specified CG. I think the specified CG is, I'm going by memory, but I think it's 55mm back from where the leading edge of the wing meets the fuselage, and I've got it set 5mm forward of that, because I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be tail heavy, and that balance actually felt really good. When I was flying at straight and level flight, I didn't see it ascending, I didn't see it descending. It seemed to hold its line really well. The only problem I was having was the elevator is a little too responsive, not quite enough expo in it, and the ailerons are way too sensitive. But yeah, I think it's got decent power on 4S, you know, as an EDF jet. There's such a difference in the performance between a pusher motor and prop and the EDF jet. It's just it's a stark contrast in performance and flight time. And while I like the EDF jets, they're fun to fly, I would rather have the performance, you know, of a pusher motor and prop on it than the EDF unit. So anyway, when I get everything set up and get it handling and flying exactly the way I want to, then I'll go ahead and publish my setup in my OpenTX model file. I'll give you all the information on it. Anyway, it is what it is. Stay tuned. As soon as I have the weather again, I'll take it back out and launch it again. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the air.